Hello and welcome to this here tutorial on Coriolis, the Third Horizon character generation. Character generation actually starts with creating the concept for the entire group of characters, because you usually play the crew of a spaceship, and in general it's not a bad idea to have a concept for the group as a whole, so you know what kind of campaign you're playing and what your characters will be doing and should be good at. That's why I had a session 0 with my group of players to create all of our characters together, which had some more benefits later on in character generation. Let's start with the group concept. There are a number of archetypical group concepts to choose from. Free traders is a good choice if you are into role-playing, diplomacy, lots of traveling with some unforeseen and maybe shady subplots. Mercenaries is good if you are mainly into combat. Explorers are good if you're well into exploring the setting and strange exotic places. Agents is for the thief players among us who want to play operatives, shadowrunners, and have elaborate heists for adventures. And finally we've got pilgrims. They also travel a lot, but they are more focused on the spiritual aspects. You're not just traveling physically, but also along the path of enlightenment. Again, something most interesting for the role players among us. With each concept comes a number of sample character concepts and sub-concepts that are typical for this group, but you shouldn't limit yourself to something like this, and these are just examples. If you want to play a soldier within a group of pilgrims, why not? They might need protection too. And a pilot might come in handy in any of the group concepts. You eventually get to pilot your own spaceship after all. You can choose not to start with the spaceship, take one of the pre-made ones or make one yourself. And depending on how expensive your ship was, your group starts with a sizable amount of debt to your patron. You also get to pick a group talent, more on that later. And you should discuss your Patreon or Nemesis with your GM, as your Patreon is likely your first quest giver, source of information and connections. And your Nemesis is someone who will play a big role in making your life difficult. We've got a few examples for each group concept, but you can of course make up your own. Only now do we actually start with the player character. Note here that I don't use the official character sheet, but one made by the community, by Oleone. Mostly because this is printing out much nicer on my laser printer. But it's overall a great character sheet. You can find a link to the Reddit post where I found it in the video description below. Character creation doesn't begin with any crunching numbers, it begins with choosing and coming up with your background, your origin and upbringing. If you're playing as a human, a humanoid, or even a semi-intelligence. Humans are considered the default with no modifiers. Humanoids are genetically modified humans. They get an extra humanoid telling at the cost of some of their reputation. A semi-intelligence is playing one of the sentient non-human races of the Third Horizon, and from a rules perspective they work the same. You get special talents at the cost of reputation, but there are some more serious background and role-playing consequences that you should really discuss with your GM and your group before you decide on playing a semi-intelligence. For your origin, you have to decide if your character is Zenithian or Firstcom. While Zenithians is the name of the second wave of settlers that came with the big colony ship Zenith, an influx of new ideas and new blood that has revitalized the horizon. Zenithian and First Come nowadays is more like a philosophy that you can choose to belong to. Zenithians think of themselves as pragmatic and modern and scientific, while First Come would think of them as traditional and pious. That led to my entire group of pilgrims being of First Come origin, and then you can either choose and decide on a home system or roll on this here table if you don't want to choose or have no idea yet. Next up, you have to choose your character concept. What should your character be able to do? These are like classes, but they don't give you anything really special. So if you've created a few characters, you might want to switch it up by altering, combining, or even going to a completely classless system. But for the first time creating a character, it's not a bad idea to just choose one of the classes and go along with what you find here. Each class, each concept comes with 3 sub-concepts that define it some more. And depending on what sub-concept you choose, you get different concept skills that you can choose from. Every class will give you possible names to pick from, a modifier for your starting reputation, a key attribute that you can raise to 5, every other attribute you can just raise to 4, and then your key concept skills. These you can raise up to 3, every other skill you can only raise to 1. You get some example appearance, some talents you can choose from, and some example personal problems. These will become a source of XP. So try to pick something that you think is interesting and you don't mind coming up at least once every gaming session. For this example character, I chose to create a soldier, just a baseline human soldier. First Come, rolled a 6 on the origin table, and I choose her to come from the Zawa system. This gives me my reputation modifier of -1, key attribute agility, and I chose the subconcept of legionary, as that gave me access to the survival skill. At this point, you have to choose your upbringing. Depending on how rich, how privileged the upbringing of your character was, you get more or less attribute points and less or more skill points, starting reputation, and starting capital. In general, you can say a plebeian character starts with more potential because of more attribute points, but is less specialized and less well equipped at the start of the game. While a privileged character will be more specialized with higher skills and better equipment, but won't quite have the same potential for growth. Stationary is somewhere in between. There are just 4 attributes you have to distribute your points between. You have to spend at least 2 points on an attribute, so that already takes care of 8 of your points. And then you can raise them up to 4, 5 for your concept's primary attribute. I choose plebeian for background, which gives me ample attribute points to put agility on 5, strength and wits on 4, and have 2 left over for empathy. Next, you distribute your skill points, and you can only raise the skills from your sub-concept to 3, every other skills just 1. Note that they are general and advanced skills. If you want to make a check on a general skill that you don't have, you just use your base attribute. but you can't make a check on an advanced skill that you don't have. So if you want to use something like culture, science, datagen, medicurgy, put at least 1 point in that skill. For the soldier, as a plebeian, I just have to dispute 8 points. I go with 3 ranged combat, as I think that will be the most important skill for a soldier, 2 melee combat, 2 survival, and 1 medicurgy. Because I think this soldier might be the last one standing at any given fight, and being able to get your teammates back on their feet might be a good idea. Next, you should roll or choose for your icon. In the vanilla rules, you roll on the icon table, and this will determine what icon your character is born under. But you also get a special icon talent, and you get extra XP when your character is acting according with the teachings of their icon. So you might want to house rule this. For example, just let the players pick an icon. Or what I did for my group, they had to roll for the icon they were born under and get that icon's talent, but they could choose to follow the teachings and get extra XP for any icon they liked. And this brings us to talent. Your group as a whole has to choose a group talent that anyone in the group can use. And depending on your concept, you have a different selection. My group, for example, Pilgrims, chose Mercy of the Icons. When you are in a tight spot, the icons will hear you. This means you can cancel the effects of darkness points that have just been spent by the GM. 1 use per session for the whole group. This can be a very powerful talent, so you should always keep that in mind. It goes on our character sheet. Then you get a talent for your icon, depending on what icon you were born under. For the soldier, I rolled the messenger. The messenger's talent is you can make someone obey you through careful words and actions without having to test manipulation. It can be used on both NPCs and PCs. Your wish must be reasonable. You cannot, for example, force an NPC to act completely against their own interests. And this comes in very handy because the character has no skill in manipulation and empathy at all. So if she has to resort to that, this talent will come in very handy. Generally, these talents can only be used once per session, and each use gives the GM 1 darkness point. You might get another talent if you're playing a humanoid or a semi-intelligence, but in general you get your third and last talent from your class, from your concept, and you pick one of your selection of 3. Some of these have, in brackets, cyb. They come together with a cybernetic implant that is quite costly. And if you pick this talent, you also should pick the according gear later. Notice, if you want to play a mystic, the only way right from the start is to play a fugitive with the mystic sub-concept, then choose the mystical power talent, and also put some points in the mystic powers skill. For my soldier, I choose combat veteran, which gives me a good chance to start any fight since it lets you roll twice on initiative or draw 2 initiative cards and take the better one. And starting the fight very often is the secret to winning the fight. And while you're sitting with your group, ideally in your session 0, you should define the relationship to the other PCs. Choose from the list or use your imagination and fill out the relationship to the other PCs. If your relationship to another PC influences an action during the game, this is a source of XP. And you can choose one other PC to be your buddy. Meaning that you can use the help action to help them during a skill check without giving the GM a darkness point. Almost at the end, you choose your gear. From each row, you choose one item. For the soldier, I'm going with heavy armor, Vulcan carbine, frag grenades, since I didn't pick the cybernetic muscles talent, an advanced scope, since I didn't pick any command skills, and a medkit, since I did pick the Medicurgy skill. With your starting beer, your starting fonts, your starting credits, you can go into weapons and equipment and buy more equipment, buy armor and weapons. But since this plebeian soldier only has 500 beer to spend, I only picked up a short-range communicator. That might come in very handy if you're out in the field, and the 500 is already spent. This shouldn't take too long at all. For the finishing touches, you just have to calculate your hit points, which is your strength plus your agility, that's 9 for the soldier, and your mind points, which equal your wits plus your empathy scores. For the soldier, this is 6. And this pretty much finishes creating the character. Next up is creating your own spaceship, and if you want to see that, consider subscribing to my channel. For now, I pray that the Traveler will watch over your journey, dreamers, until we shall meet again.